Today, we pay brunch prices for food that started on a farm. The women who made it had 30 men to feed and no time to waste. One dish on this list was built from something most kitchens throw away. One kept 30 men going all day for less than the cost of a stamp. And the reason these meals are gone is not what you would expect. Every summer, threshing crews moved farm to farm across grain country. One woman kept them all fed. These are 25 harvest meals that time forgot. Number 25. Iced tea and lemonade. The men worked from before sunrise, and by mid-morning, the threshing dust was in their teeth. Tea came in big enamel pots, lemonade when there were lemons, plain tea when there were not. They drank between field rounds. That was how 30 men stayed standing until noon. Number 24. Sliced tomatoes and onions. The garden was the grocery store. Farm women kept kitchen gardens not as a hobby, but as a food supply. And in August, those gardens were at their peak. Tomatoes sliced thick, onions pulled that morning, salt and sometimes vinegar. Nothing on this plate cost a cent. The garden made sure of that. Number 23. Lettuce salad. In the middle of a harvest table loaded with fried meat and boiled potatoes, the lettuce was there to cut through the weight of it. Garden lettuce, dressed with vinegar or cream, ready before the men came through the door. Something cool, something fresh. Every threshing menu from Iowa to Kansas had it on the table. Number 22. Green beans. Farm wives turned the garden directly into crew food. Beans picked that morning, cooked with salt, pork, or butter until they went soft. In August heat, with the wood stove already going for bread and fried meat, a pot of beans was just one more thing on the fire. It always made the table. Number 21. Peas with butter. Early in the season, before the wheat was ready, peas were the softest thing on the table. Shelled the night before, boiled and buttered. They disappeared fast. Men who had been pitching heavy grain bundles all morning reached for whatever was closest, and peas with butter were always within reach. Number 20. Dill pickles. Mennonite farm communities across Kansas and the Dakotas preserved dill pickles by the gallon every fall, pulling jars from cellar shelves straight through the following harvest season. Cucumbers, dill, vinegar, salt. The brine did all the work over winter. Every threshing table had a jar open by noon. Number 19. Watermelon rind pickles. The ingredient here is the part most kitchens discard without a second thought, the white rind of a watermelon. Farm women pickled it with vinegar, sugar, and cinnamon until it turned tender and shelf-stable for months. Mennonite cookbooks document this recipe in careful detail. Today, chefs call it zero-waste pickling. Farm wives just called it not wasting food. Number 18. Pickled beets. Beets went into the cellar in the fall and came out through harvest season. Vinegar, sugar, spices. The color alone set them apart. On a table full of pale food, they cut through the grease of fried meat and held their crunch all the way down the table. Number 17. Coleslaw. Cabbage kept longer than almost anything else in a farm cellar, which made it one of the most reliable bulk dishes on a threshing table. Made the day before, dressed with vinegar or cream. It was cheap, it went with everything, and it never ran out. Number 16. Cucumber salad. Cucumbers peaked in August, which was exactly when the harvest came in. Sliced thin, dressed with vinegar or cream, set out cold for men who had been working in field heat since before sunrise. Something cooling on a table that had almost nothing cold on it. Number 15. Homemade bread. Bread was baked every day in a threshing kitchen, sometimes twice in a single day. A 5-pound bag of flour ran about 25 cents in 1935, and it went further than almost anything else on the table. Loaves came out of the oven and were gone before the next round was ready. Number 14. Biscuits with butter and jam. Biscuits baked faster than bread, which made them the quick option when the table needed filling in a hurry. Flour, lard, milk, baking powder. The jam came from the cellar, put up from the previous summer's fruit. A biscuit with jam was often the first thing gone. Number 13. Apple butter and jam. Apple butter was cooked from fall apples over a long simmer and jarred while the harvest was still weeks out. It went on bread, on biscuits, and kept for months on cellar shelves without refrigeration. The harder part to account for is not the ingredients, it is the knowledge that made them work. Old farm recipe cards said things like bake until done or season to taste. No temperature, no timer. Those cards were not incomplete. The rest of the recipe was in the cook herself, in the way she read the heat of a wood stove from 3 feet away, in knowing when the bread was ready before she opened the door, in the years of practice behind every instruction that said enough. Farm families ran their entire food supply out of their own kitchen, baking, preserving, butchering, canning, all from scratch. But that knowledge moved by watching, not writing. There was no written instruction that could replace the woman who already knew. When the daughters left for town, the recipe boxes went with them. The hands did not. That is where it started to slip away. Number 12. Mashed potatoes and gravy. 10 pounds of potatoes ran about 19 cents in 1935. A threshing kitchen went through many times that. Potatoes boiled and mashed with butter and milk, piled into bowls, with gravy from meat drippings poured over the top. This was the stomach filler. It went on every plate, under everything else. Number 11. Meat broth noodles. The broth that came off simmered bones was too valuable to waste, and nothing stretched it further than homemade egg noodles, boiled soft, served in the broth itself. It was the meal built from parts most kitchens today discard without consideration. Farm kitchens discarded nothing. Number 10. Ham platter. Ham was saved for the crew. That was the rule on many farms, spoken or not. Home-cured pork, soaked to cut the salt, sliced thick, laid out on a platter. Setting the ham on the table meant the crew was being treated like guests, not just fed like workers. It made a difference. Number 9. Roast beef. This was not everyday food. Roast beef at a threshing table was a signal it meant the harvest was going well, or the farmer wanted the crew to think it was. Beef roasted with potatoes, drippings turned into gravy. Some families recalled it at every reunion for the next 30 years. Number 8. Fried chicken. The men remembered this one for decades. Without refrigeration, there was no storing a butchered bird overnight. Dean Buller, who grew up around threshing season, recalled women starting with live chickens in the morning and having fried chicken on the table by noon. Butchered at first light, in the pan by 10, on the table before noon. Number 7. Chicken and noodles over mashed potatoes. Chicken boiled until it fell off the bone, shredded back into egg noodles cooked in that same broth, then ladled over a plate already loaded with mashed potatoes. Carbohydrates on carbohydrates. Men who pitched grain bundles all day in July, heat burned every bit of it before dark. Today, restaurants serve the same dish and call it comfort food. Number 6. Sausage and fried pork. Home butchered pork went into everything. Sausage links in a cast iron pan. Pork patties pressed thin. Salt-cured cuts laid beside the bread. Heavy, salty, built for work. A pound of bacon ran about 41 cents in 1935 families who butchered their own cut that cost to almost nothing. Number 5. Tapioca pudding. One farm wife always brought it, not sometimes, but always, according to one harvest account. Tapioca, milk, sugar, eggs when there were eggs to spare. Soft and sweet in the middle of a table built for hard work. The men who came back the next harvest expected it. Number 4. Caramel pie. Dean Buller, who grew up around threshing season, specifically remembered the pies when he talked about those days decades later. Sugar cooked slowly until it darkened, combined with milk and eggs, baked in a crust. A luxury built from almost nothing. The kind of thing a man talked about when he talked about harvest. Number 3. Chocolate pie. Sugar ran about 28 cents for 5 pounds in 1935. For men working in August heat since before sunrise, something dark and sweet at the end of the meal carried the weight of a luxury. The pies were what men who worked those harvests talked about longest, not just that they ate, but that someone made sure they ate well. Number 2. Raisin meringue pie. When fresh fruit was unavailable, dried raisins filled the pie shell. They kept when fresh fruit would not. Sugar, eggs, a little vinegar to lift the filling, egg whites whipped for the top. One family cookbook described it as a poor fruit pie made elegant. The men who ate it just called it gone. What ended these meals was not a food company, not a trend, and not simple forgetfulness. By the 1930s and 1940s, tractors and combines were beginning to replace the old threshing ring. The labor math changed. You no longer needed 20 or 30 neighbors moving farm to farm to bring in the wheat. The cook shack tradition, where young women were sometimes hired for 4 to 6 weeks straight just to feed threshing crews, quietly became unnecessary. Then the daughters went to work in town, and the farm kitchens they left behind got smaller. Root cellars stopped being restocked. Wood stoves were replaced. The recipe boxes stayed, but the recipes inside had always assumed a cellar full of jars, a garden out back, and 30 men showing up at noon. Without those conditions, the recipes were untranslatable. The knowledge had nowhere to go. Number 1. The whole thresher's table. There was no single dish that mattered most. There was a table, fried chicken, mashed potatoes, gallons of gravy, bread, biscuits, dill pickles, pickled beets, coleslaw, green beans, pies, cake, iced tea, lemonade. A woman who had been worrying about this meal since before the grain was even ready set it out. The farmer saw a crew coming over the hill. His wife saw a lot of cooking. 30 men sat down. Nobody said anything. They were too hungry and then too full for any of it to need a word. The USDA now estimates that feeding a family of 4 on a careful food budget costs over $1,000 a month. These women fed 30 men on a wood stove before noon and made it look like a full meal because they were not just surviving. They were running a kitchen the way a production line runs, with no waste, no excess, no margin for error, and no written recipe that could tell anyone else how to do it exactly the same way. That knowledge was not documented, it was demonstrated. If you have a grandmother's recipe box somewhere, open it. Find the card that says something like "bake until done." That is the one worth keeping. Not because the recipe is complete, but because it is the last record of someone who already knew how to finish it. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. What else did she know that we forgot to write down?